In recent years, Casio have really doubled down on their vintage watch selling in the 21st century. So leaning on their heritage from the 80s and making new models which interest today's market. So they've gone beyond the old resin watches and gone beyond the classic stainless steel watches. And one derivative is the blacked out versions of these vintage digital watches. And here I have two such watches to compare. So on the right hand side we have the LW204, and on the left hand side we have the B640. And if you found this video, you're probably trying to compare the two of them because they're very similar. They're very similar shape, they've got very similar displays, and in some respects they achieve similar looks for you, the blacked out stealthy look. One on a oyster style black coated steel bracelet and one on a very minimalist rubber bracelet. So let's get into the comparison. Well, first thing you might have noticed already is, yes, they're both blacked out displays, but one of them is better than the other. The B640 on the left has a more legible display. Straight on, there's not too much difference. If you go and change the viewing angle to the south side, B640 is better. You view them side on, similar, but from the top angle, as soon as you rotate the LW204 a tiny bit, good luck telling the time. Whereas the B640, you can still tell the time. So legibility is better here. In terms of the face design, this is the extreme level of minimalism from Casio. Very little information happening here on the display, simply Casio and water resist. Whereas over here you've got standard of water resist at 5 bar, and you've got the Illuminator brand in here, and it tells you what the different buttons do. The shape, as you can see, is the same. That kind of chopped off circular shape. Sizing wise, exactly the same. So they're going to be using the same module, case molding. In fact, they're both black coated resin. So from these sort of angles, they look like the same watch. They have the same backlights, the orange backlight, which you don't have to hold to leave on. They have the buttons in the same place, so they have the illuminator on the top right. The feel of the watches is very different on the wrist. So when you put the B640 on your wrist, it feels a little bit cheaper because you have the weight of the bracelet really highlighting the fact that it's a cheap plastic watch on your wrist. So the weight is kind of is more noticeable that there's a very light watch on you. Whereas with this one, because you have very little weight all around due to it being a rubber strap, this watch feels kind of more balanced. Let me put them both on my wrist and I'll show you how they look on a 16 centimeter wrist. So certainly the rubber strap appears to be a little wider, but in fact they're the same dimensions. It's just that the blankness here gives the impression that it's wider. You can see they sit the same thickness on the wrist. As I've talked about in my other videos, one of the things that I like about the metal bracelets is you don't see the excess strap when you look down at your wrist at 12 o'clock, whereas you do with the resin bracelet. This particular resin bracelet seems to have quite a lot of excess strap. So if you have a smaller wrist like me, 16 centimeters, that might be a concern for you. You can see they give a different look on the wrist. This one appears slightly larger because of the fact that there's a lot of blank space here, whereas this one has more going on and therefore appears more condensed despite them having the same dimensions. To me, this watch, the B640, would go unnoticed a little bit more, whereas this one is more of a statement piece in my opinion. It's more different to, let's say, the standard Casio watch because of the fact there's so much empty space on both the face and the strap, whereas this is This is just kind of a blackout twist on the regular Casio vintage style. But I think they both have their own appeal. So if you were considering either of these watches, I hope you found this useful. I will speak to you soon.